Thank you, Mr. Jones, Mr. Norquist, and ladies and gentlemen. The genesis, I think, of this symposium is an increased interaction between left and right all over the country. The powers that be for centuries have liked to divide and rule left and right about the areas they actually disagree on, and they do disagree. There's no sugarcoating that. They disagree on things like regulation, taxes, reproductive rights, school prayer, gun control, etc. But the areas of agreement are massive and diverse. In my book, Unstoppable, I have 24 areas of convergence in terms of public opinion, that is, polls, and then some of them are going operational into the political, electoral arena, and some of them have actually been enacted. Juvenile justice reform has been enacted in 15 states, and only because Republican and Democratic legislatures got together to make it happen. Grover, Norquist, and Newt Gingrich and others have started a group called Right on Crime to join with liberal and progressive prison reformers to challenge the incarceration of hundreds of thousands of people at huge taxpayer expense for long sentences for nonviolent transgressions. It's also going operational in an area maybe that Grover disagrees with, and that is restoring the minimum wage to what it would have been adjusted for inflation starting in 1968. That would be now $11 an hour, federal minimum wage, which is stuck at $7.25. That comes in 70 to 80%. That is widely supported among workers who call themselves conservatives in Walmart and elsewhere, but it has reached operational results in a number of cities and a number of states that have raised the minimum wage higher than the federal. It is yet to reach Congress, Capitol Hill, which we call Wuthering Heights these days. The other areas imply not a unanimity of left-right, but enough to make an unstoppable majority. In the House of Representatives now, there is a majority of Republican and Democrats opposed to the corporate-managed, sovereignty-shredding, job-exporting, so-called trade agreements that go beyond trade and subordinate consumer, worker, and environmental standards to the imperatives of trade, all in enormous secrecy, with the final decisions made by secret, literally, secret tribunals in Geneva, Switzerland, or elsewhere. That's going to be a big battle in the next 2 months as President Obama, with Republican support, is going to try to get fast-track procedures through so they can send the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement to Congress with no amendments permitted under limited debate. There's also a left-right convergence. I worked with Ron Paul on this, on the civil liberties violations of the Patriot Act and the lack of due process that is given, that is denied people with funny-sounding names in our country. This is a wide area against NSA snooping, against invading privacy. That comes in very high in the polls. Right now, under federal law, a federal agent can search your home and not have to tell you for 72 hours. That's not the America that a lot of liberals and conservatives thought they grew up in. There's also a left-right alliance against big banks that are too big to fail. Too big to fail, George Will says, means they should be too big to exist. And so it comes in about 90% to break up the big banks that are too big to fail and therefore have to be bailed out by the taxpayer. The Wall Street bailout was really the signal development in the last 10 years, trillions of dollars of a variety of corporate welfare bailouts. And corporate welfare comes in many ways. It comes in terms of outright cash to corporations, certain corporations. It comes in the way of privileges and immunities from law enforcement. It comes in the way of loan guarantees. The nuclear industry couldn't exist without 100% loan guarantees for new nuclear plants because Wall Street thinks they're too risky for private loans, so they want Uncle Sam to be the loan guarantor. There's a huge amount of research and development, which we all pay for, that significantly built the aerospace industry, the biotech industry, the computer internet industry, the containerization industry, a lot of the pharmaceutical industry. These were research done with taxpayer funding at the National Institutes of Health, National Cancer Institute, the Space Agency, NASA, Defense Department, R&D. It's often said that the Defense Department's basic research helped develop the internet. There are a lot of other areas of corporate welfare. It's a very complex area, but it really comes down to taxpayers giving important monies and assets to corporations with very little in return to bail them out or to make them richer or to fix their mistakes. And when the big corporations have this kind of influence in Washington, it's not just taxpayers that are disadvantaged. It's small business. It's unfair competition vis-a-vis small business. And it's not just small business, it's all of us who own the Commonwealth property of the United States. We own the public lands, 1/3 of America. We own the public airwaves. We own a lot of this research and development coming out of Washington, but we don't control its disbursement. It's controlled very heavily by corporations, the timber companies, the oil and gas companies, the coal companies, the gold and silver industry. Most people in colleges, and I count my college as well, and law schools, never really study corporate welfare. They don't study crony capitalism. They don't study the merger of big business and big government against the public interest. You may speculate as to why they don't, but it's a very controversial issue and it offends powerful and wealthy interests. Maybe that explains it. Also, there aren't all that many jobs after you graduate if you specialize in challenging corporate welfare. That doesn't look good on your resume. Now, what is going on in Congress and the state legislature is quite interesting. Some of these 24 areas in the book have gone operational. I mentioned the Trans-Pacific, I mentioned juvenile justice, but there has been some timid efforts to set up commissions to investigate corporate welfare and recommend which ones should be abandoned. John McCain had a commission proposal. He put it in about 4 years ago. It didn't go anywhere, didn't even have hearings, and he never reintroduced it. In the House of Representatives, a Republican and Democrat member of the House, they put in a commission in 2010. It never went anywhere. They didn't reintroduce it. We first testified together, Grover and I, over 15 years ago before John Kasich, Republican chair of the House Budget Committee, who held the first congressional hearing on crony capitalism or corporate welfare in American history. To give you an idea, it's nothing new. The federal government gave a railroad company 40 million acres to build a railroad in the northern tier of the United States to Washington State. 40 million acres is 12 times the size of Connecticut. You don't need that many acres to build a railroad, but they were given huge areas of forest, which they have exploited as a massive windfall for what the government overgave them. And so this has been going on a long time, but it's maturing into a metastasized corporate state, corporate socialism, crony capitalism, whatever you think about it. The problem with it is that the groups who are on the same side, like Heritage Foundation, Cato, Economic Policy Institute, Public Citizen, Common Cause, left, right, that's not their top priority. Their priority is fighting each other over issues of significance that they get their funding from. And so it's never anybody's top priority, which is why I recommend the establishment of nonprofit advocacy groups whose only mission is to foster convergence into reality so we can get something done in this country, so we can improve our country with an unstoppable majority of left and right. That's the goal we have, and I've said to Grover, I'll fund one full-time person. If he funds one full-time person, we're going to start a squeaky little group in Washington that will grow into a transformation of the political alignment in this country, which is basically built on endemic conflict rather than chronic convergence. Last point I want to make is the issue of foreign and military policy. This isn't areas that we're known for working in, Grover and I, but I think we agree that empire is out of control, that we have what Ed Crane, the head of the Cato Institute, told me, and I quote it in the book, Unstoppable, where he says, I'm against, I'll quote him exactly. He said, Ralph, I oppose all corporate subsidies, unconstitutional wars, the Patriot Act, and the Federal Reserve run amok. I said, that's a pretty good start. Empire, bloated military budgets, huge waste, contracting abuses, corporate crime, and we're increasing the ferocity of violence against us. We're metastasized. It's not like it's working. It's spreading into one country after another, a quagmire. The lesson of empires throughout history is that eventually they all devour themselves. All empires devour themselves because they bleed their domestic necessities and their domestic resources in moving throughout the world to impose their will. And so I was very pleased in 2010 to see Congressman Ron Paul join with Congressman Barney Frank, can you imagine, into a caucus to challenge the bloated military budget. That is a major area of future convergence, and that will deal with a great deal of effect with the integrity of our public budgets and the disposition of our taxpayer resources. 2 days ago, a major study that came out on corporate welfare, company by company, tremendous breakthrough, and you can get it free on goodjobsfirst.org. It's called goodjobsfirst.org. And 3 days ago, there was a left-right convergence that defeated in West Virginia an attempt by oil and gas companies to get eminent domain to seize farmers' land if they wouldn't sell it voluntarily. That was defeated in the last 24 hours before a certain victory for the oil and gas company, because the word went out on the internet and left-right poured their opposition as citizens on the legislature, the House in Charleston, and it deadlocked 49-49 and defeated this eminent domain. Another area of convergence by left-right. Thank you very much.